Good morning. Welcome to our Saturday mornings Bible studies. So, I hope you're all staying good and healthy. Uh, I guess all of you already know the news about Father Anthony, but his COVID positive test, and so we are closing our three parishes, St. Patrick's, St. Richard, and St. Edward's, for the next 14 days. So we will be out basically throughout this last few weeks of ordinary time, and we will be back on the weekend, open again on the last weekend of November, which is the first weekend of Advent. Uh, I want us to pray for Father Anthony. I know some of you made it public. Father Ron wanted to keep it uh, um, close because he's worried about too much highlight. But so we have to pray for him because I know some of you also know I don't want to let him out. So let us pray for both of them for a prompt and speed recovery. Uh, they are doing well. They are it's nothing major. They are monitoring themselves and resting and doing what you're supposed to do in regard to this virus. So we just pray for them and ask the Lord to send a healing hand upon them. Um, we I want you to continue to have them in prayers and hope that they can recover promptly and we can come back soon together to continue our journey of faith. We also know that so far I'm Eloy and I we are doing good, and so we're still good, healthy. We are going to have our masses live stream, so everything basically continues the same. But we are not going to have any public people in masses, but we will have the Sunday mass live stream at 9 o'clock in English and noon in Spanish, and then from Tuesday through Friday we'll continue to have mass at 9 o'clock in English live stream, and then Spanish at 10 o'clock. So we that's what we will do, and then Saturday mornings we gather here. So at least for this next 2 weeks, we're gonna do that. Uh, so just tune in and let the people know and everybody know that we are doing this. Hopefully the news reach out to everyone and they can see that we are not having in-person masses this weekend. So with that in mind, I want us to dig in what we have left. But as you knew, and I hope the reflections that we have throughout the week about the saints helped us to kind of walk into our faith, and I wanted to for you to experience kind of a retreat type of uh, mindfulness as I was away also in retreat and praying and reflecting and asking the Lord for all of us and for all of you also as now that a family in faith and in Christ that we are. My reflection and my time together was on this uh, book. This was a gift that were given for ordination, and is the book is from Karl Rahner or some writings of him, and it's the mystical way in everyday life. And I wanted to reflect because I have kind of about the mystical life, and I have kind of crossed two different articles and writings that and it was actually Runner who said that the Christian or the Catholic of the future need to be mystical, and I wanted to see what it meant, and I can say that, of course, as a person of faith and as a priest and as somebody who kind of tried to work hard on taking the life, the spiritual life serious, I think the mystical way is what really all of us should be heading for, which is basically that we need to be able to find God in everyday things, and and that sounds simple, and that sounds like almost like a cliche, but uh, it's a reality. And if we are open and if we are really willing to look hard and to listen and to pray, we will be able to find God in the simple and ordinary moments of our lives. And I think it's kind of a different approach. And one of the things that I came across in the book is that the mystical approach to life involves that the ordinary life and everyday events are interpreted in the light of the extraordinary. No, that's sometimes that we kind of work at the other way around. We expect something extraordinary in our lives to reflect about God's presence in that moment. But the mystical approach is to see God's extraordinary power in these ordinary events of our lives. And there's also the natural, to see the natural things like creation from the perspective of the supernatural, so from the perspective of the power of God. And then the concrete, from the concrete and simple things in daily life, from the position of the transcendent. And then the human, our humanness, from the view of the divine. And I think it's really like, if we look at it, and I spent some time praying about it, it's really, really a good exercise for us. And of course, Karl Rahner was a Jesuit, and that's basically some of you, if you have a background in doing some spiritual work with Saint Ignatius of Loyola, you will see that this is more or less the sense for Ignatius for us to live our spirituality. But again, to look in those ordinary moments of our life, ordinary events of our life, and to see the extraordinary in there. And I was myself, as I was in retreat, as I was in this throughout this week, two events were really extraordinary, and I just the generosity of the people and the family that welcomed me into their home for this retreat. It was just an ordinary thing for them probably, but it was really an extraordinary uh, event, an extraordinary moment, and I could really appreciate God's love and God's generosity towards me as a poor servant. And you can see that. And there's another event also, somebody who just surprised me with something great, and I was overwhelmed by that, overwhelmed by how God uses ordinary moments in our lives to touch us and touch us profoundly. So I guess my whole thing is that let us all be really open to watch for God's presence in the midst of us, to listen what He's saying through other people, and to pray. So, and then another thing that I thought it was really nice, and I probably you came to connect with me to do the encyclical, but I wanted to share this is I uh, I came across something that I always kind of saw my spirituality or my way of living my faith through the lenses of Saint Paul, and how he would kind of talk about like it's no longer me who lives but Christ who lives in me, and being like self entering, which is a harder thing to do. But then I came across in the book, and I note that it talks about that the mystics of everyday life live out the more excellent way, which is the way that St. Paul describes in Corinthians, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, which is, man, mystics. They practice the love of God in loving their neighbor, and they find God in their humble, persevering, and self-giving service to one another. So, a few notes, a few comments about what I experienced at the retreat, but let us now get into real business. So, Dulce, get us the slideshow. So we have done 5 chapters, and I wanna really let's see if we get these 3 that are left done. So we last time we were discussing how we needed a new, Pope Francis were discussing about how we needed a new politics of love. So politics that we will be able to uh, care and create really loving relationships between one another. So now we have these 3 chapters that I want to really get into. It's the next 3 ones are, first one, chapter 6. He talks about the dialogue and friendship in society. So as very important for us is how can we really dialogue and create friendships among ourselves through dialogue, through conversations, through openness to listen to the other. And then he talks about paths in the chapter 7, path to renew encounter, to renew encounters with others. And he talks about there, he dedicates this chapter 7 to healing the wounds and reconciliation and forgiveness. But he wants us to really be mindful that to be able to forgive doesn't mean that we need to forget the reality, like and that's probably some uh, we need to have memory. He invites us to have memory and be able to have in mind that there has been terrible things that happened, but we need to be able to forgive and heal those wounds, but never forget the things that had happened, so that we would not repeat them. And then chapter 8, he talks about how religions could be um, in service to fraternity in the world. And I think that chapter, it's one of the things that he tackles is that religions, uh, we could be a unifying factor, or we could be a divisive factor. Like, and that's I think it's Hans Kuhn, one theologian of the 20th century, who talks about in a book that we will only have peace when all the religions come together. Not to like say like, oh, everybody lives what is the religious, but if the religions come to, I mean, like, all the religions in the world are able to coexist, or to kind of relate to each other in an understanding way, and without like each one of us telling the other that, whoa, you have the wrong way and I have the best way on it. But to come to an understanding, then it would be probably uh, easy to have peace in the world. Okay, so let's just dig into chapter 6, and again we're gonna probably fly by because it's I kind of give you a summary of those three chapters. So dialogue is, for Pope Francis, is approaching, speaking, listening, looking at, coming to know and understand one another, and to find common ground. All these things are summed up in the one word: dialogue. If we want to encounter and help one another, we have to dialogue. And I think that's is one of the things that he wants us to be mindful, no, that we need to create this dialogue, and he talks about social dialogue for a new culture, which means like uh, we need to create a culture of dialogue. And sometimes we are, as you have seen, and we have seen media or different moments, we don't create a culture of dialogue. We are rather in a culture of throwing each other's like, and not listening to each other, but just uh, calling names, and sometimes even like judging, no. But he wants uh, to really have a dialogue, like to really be able, all of us, to discuss and converse and be able to understand, no. He says that sometimes dialogue is confused with something quite different: the feverish exchange of opinions on social networks, frequently based on media and information that is not always reliable, no. And you, my friends, you are in Facebook, you may see many of those things out there. One of the things that I don't like to do, and it's just like Facebook, like go like that, but I most of the times, I would be lying if I say all the time, but most of the times I don't stop to see comments, because sometimes in some of those discussions and comments, you're really saddened by what you read and what you see, no. So just kind of have a dialogue that is loving, that is open to others, to is ready to receive and ready to give, and uh, being open to truth. None of us had the fullness of truth, so we need to be able to when we dialogue, to be open to maybe think that we may be wrong. And that's the hard thing, because none of us starts a dialogue with the notion that your opinion may be wrong. We all think that we are right. So let's go to the next one. Building together. So Pope Francis talks about that. Yes, once you create this discussion and this culture of dialogue, well, we need to be able that we all need to work to create and build together our world. And he says that differences are creative. They create tension, and in the resolution of tension lies humanity progress. It is good to have dialogue, and sometimes to have a difference of opinion and all difference, because when we are able to come together with our difference, then we are creating and we are building. The problem that is, the most times we just stay in our difference, and we are not able to move forward, to take the next step. And so Pope Francis is inviting us, and really kind of this building together. So he even quotes the bishops from Australia on that they, as bishops, they were saying, we cannot accept a digital world designed to exploit our weaknesses and bring out the worst in people. And that's what we need to be mindful of: our media, social media, which we can unite us, it can help us to grow and be together, but at the same time, sometimes it can exploit the worst of us, and show the worst of us. So it's a mindfulness to an invitation to be able to work and dialogue together to build together a society. So next one. So he talks about the basis of consensus. No, we need to be able to uh, really tackle the situations and tackle the reality, and not just kind of where he says no, the solution is not relativism. Okay, then you have your opinion, you have your truth, I have my truth, and then we all know. It's kind of being really have some moral values, some basis in which we are kind of could agree with and build from there, and that's what is kind of hard. And then he says, well, of course, if we allow relativism to take over, so the moral values will be interpreted by those who are in power and will be defined as they find it fit. Again, our values, our truth come from the gospel, and that's what we need to kind of have it as a basis for dialogue. And I guess it's that's the same thing. And I'm not gonna get into politics, but if we are all here and we all love our country, I think the basis of consensus here for us would be, the basis for consensus here in our country will be that we all love our country, that we wanted to uh, be successful, that we wanted to be a country that we all could live and be as an example to other countries. And that's the basis for consensus. So there is like, well, the other things that we need to discuss and flesh out, but kind of like set what is at the level, at the foundation, and then build from there. So to the next one. So Pope Francis talks, okay, consensus and the truth. The dignity of others is to be respected in all circumstances, not because that dignity is something we have invented or imagined, but because human beings possess an intrinsic worth superior to that of material objects and contingent situations. This requires that they be treated differently, that every human being possesses an inalienable dignity is a truth that corresponds to human nature apart from all cultural change. For this reason, human beings have the same inviolable dignity in every age of history, and no one can consider himself or herself authorized by particular situations to deny this conviction or act against it. So just like one of the basic consensus there. So let's the next one. A new culture. Life for all is confrontations is the art of encounter. And then Pope Francis talks about, I have frequently called for the growth of a culture of encounter, capable of transcending our difference and divisions. This means working to create a many-faceted polyhedron, I think is the way it's pronounced, whose different sides form a varied unity in which the whole is greater than the part. And I like this image, and this is kind of what uh, is the beauty of this document. And I think this is something that you, all of us here in this country, we know that because it's basically at some point the country was called, or is being called, the melting pot, which basically is that everybody from different cultures and different points of view come here and become and create this nation. But Pope Francis talks about that it is good to have many different views, not the polyhedron. It has different sizes and different faces and different things that are all there part of one thing, but it's not that is the only part. No, it gives different perspectives, different, and I think that's really beautiful image to talk about society or a new culture of what a, a, a nation should look like. our church should look like. The image of a polyhedron can represent a society where differences coexist, complementing, enriching, and reciprocally illuminating one another, even amid disagreements and reservations. Each of us can learn something from others. This is just, I mean, if we only we would be able to apply this. And again, I know I have had conversations with some of you, and of course, always the conversation is how do we make this possible at the national level or at countries? And I think this is only being possible if each one of us start working on it, and that's what we need to kind of be mindful of this. I think this encyclical does the invitation. So now, how am I going to be able to coexist, to complement, to enrich, and illuminate one another, even if we have disagreements and reservations? That's the challenge, but that's what we could create a new culture, as Pope Francis talks about. So he talks about an encounter that becomes culture. Now, to speak of a culture of encounter means that we as people should be passionate about the next one. Sorry. It should be passionate about meeting others, seeking points of contact, building bridges, planning a project that includes for everyone. Again, this seems to be Pope Francis is dreaming here, but this is what we need to move towards. And I think in our parishes and our faith communities, we could do that. We really could create a culture of encounter that we all want to build bridges and all that, and of course in our city, This becomes an inspiration and a style of life. The subject of this culture is the people, not simply one part of society that will pacify the rest with the help of professional and media resources. So it's all of us. It's not just one group of people. And he talks about, in the next one, he talks about the joy of acknowledging others. All this culture of encounter calls for an ability to recognize other people's right to be themselves and to be different. How hard is that? I struggle with this. I want everybody to be the way I am, no? That if to be prompt in answering the messages, to be prompt in and doing things, and we cannot be all uniform. We need to be able to recognize that there's other way to 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 act and to live. And when I look and I reflect back, many times the conflicts that I have had in my life are precisely because that lack. I sometimes lack the ability to recognize the other people's rights to be themselves and to be different. And I just kind of want them. I experienced it in the Dominican Republic several times, because you kind of want people to be like you and act like you and think like you, and in terms of like to move forward, and no, it's just not possible. So I think this is a good invitation for all of us to be able to recognize that, no? And of course, Pope Francis talks about that this encounter and acknowledging others is not only between the powerful and the rich and the academical, but it's an encounter that everybody, like even the poorest of the poorest is also, we need to be able to encounter all of us, because again, as we have talked in the past, it is easy for us to get in contact with people that we know and they're close to us, than people who are kind of different and from different society. No, let us move to the next one. Recovering kindness. He talks about this. Says the consumerist individualism has led to great injustice. Other persons come to be viewed simply as obstacles to our own serene existence. We end up treating them as annoyances, and we become increasingly aggressive. This is even more the case in time of crisis, catastrophe, and hardship, when we are tempted to think in terms of the old saying, every man for himself. Yet even then, we can choose to cultivate kindness. Those who do so become stars shining in the midst of darkness. St. Paul describes kindness as a fruit of the Holy Spirit. It involves speaking words of comfort, strength, consolation, and encouragement, and no words that demean, sadden, anger, or show scorn. Recovering kindness. How different would be the world if people will be all kind. I have a friend, somebody who always uses that word when greets or talks to a person, no, like kind friend or kind person. And I think it's really a good reminder that we need to be kind, that we need to look at the other with kindness and love, and not just, as Pope Francis would say here, as obstacles that sometimes they may become. Even maybe one way to show kindness, all of us, is when we are driving out there and the person in front of us doesn't do the things that we want them to do. Maybe we have to be kind and just not even get mean with them or say something, and just be kind and say a prayer. Eloy is kind of laughing here because he's probably one of those who honk and all that. Anyway, let's move to the next one. So kindness frees us from the cruelty that at times infects human relationships, from the anxiety that prevents us from thinking of others, from the frantic flurry of activity that forgets that others also have a right to be happy. This is really being kind. Is what we just was discussing. Sometimes because we wanted everything fast and going there, and sometimes we allow ourselves in the whole business of life, and so busy, so fasted, that we forget to dedicate time, or be kind to the person that is there, no? And so Pope Francis says that often nowadays we find neither the time nor the energy to stop and be kind to others, to say excuse me, pardon me, thank you. And well, I went into the retreat, I took a walk, and I was kind of also thinking about that. We say hi to somebody, and that person didn't reply, but I mean, like, probably the person was in the phone, like listening to music, whatever, didn't listen to it. But one of the things that surprises me is that even to say hi, to say pardon or excuse me, we kind of sometimes like forget that. And even now with our, like, everybody goes to with the ear pods and having everything like on your ears, you kind of be on your own zone, and forget about the other. And it's really sad that we are losing that. So we need to really cultivate this, and really be able to bring the kindness back again. Okay, so, oh, let's go. Chapter 7. I want to finish this. So, in the chapter 7, a path to renewed encounter. So, in many parts of the world, there is a need for path of peace to heal open wounds. There is also a need for peacemakers, men and women, prepared to work boldly and creatively to initiate process of healing and renew encounter. So this is one of the things that Pope Francis kind of, in this chapter, focus on creating this kind of forgiveness and reconciliation in the world, no? And so Pope Francis says, well, renew encounter does not mean returning to a time prior to conflicts. All of us change over time. Pain and conflict transform us. We no longer have used to for empty diplomacy, dissimulation, double speak, hidden agendas, or good manners that mask reality. Those who were fierce enemies have to speak from the start and clear truth. They have to learn how to cultivate a penitential memory, one that can accept the past in order not to cloud the future with their own regrets, problems, and plans. Truth is, in fact, is an inseparable companion of justice and mercy. And I thought that was really good, no? Truth is an inseparable companion of justice and mercy. All three together are essential to building peace. Each, moreover, prevents the other from being altered. Truth should not lead to revenge, but rather to reconciliation and forgiveness. And this is what Poff talks about, like, yeah, we the conflicts and the things that had happened, as I said, transform us, and to really have create an encounter, and create a society and create some reconciliation and forgiveness. We need to recognize that we have hurt each other, that we have done damage to each other. But if we are to move forward, we need to begin from that truth and build. And sometimes we kind of, oh, okay, just forget about the whole thing, and like start anew. Well, if you forget about that, that's, you don't really forget. That's always underneath, and it's gonna come up. So the building something from a new, as a renew encounter, as Pope Francis talks, is to be able to recognize that truth, that damage that has been done, and then build in a dialogue. So he talks about the art, the next one, the art and architecture of peace. And the path to peace does not mean making society bluntly uniform, but getting people to work together, side by side, in pursuing goals that benefit everyone. It's the path to social unity always entails acknowledging the possibility that others have, at least in part, a legitimate point of view, something worthwhile to contribute, even if they were in error or acted badly. This is kind of the thing. So, you know, we when we are hurt, we sometimes consider that the other person just did it because it was mean, and don't even give the benefit of the doubt that probably there was something else in there. And so, to be able to create this is to acknowledge that maybe in what they did and in what they say, they maybe they have something that we need to kind of consider, and not just judge completely the whole situation, no. And he talks about as an art of um an art and architecture of peace. So it's an art, when some of you are like have hobbies, and like to do handy stuff, it takes time and concentration, and working easily, working very mindful in the things that you do. To make some wood things, or I think Dave is connected here, and he likes to do stuff with wood, and it's an art. You need to work uh, with your hands, and be mindful, and it takes a lot of time and energy and work. So also creating peace in the world, it takes a lot of work. So let's go to the next one, and the next one, because I already spoke. So, beginning with the list, he talks about building social friendship does not only call for rapprochement between groups who took different sides at some troubled period of history, but also for a renewed encounter with the most impoverished and vulnerable sectors of society. For peace is not merely absence of war, but a tireless commitment, especially on the part of those of us charged with greater responsibility, to recognize, protect, and concretely restore the dignity so often overlooked or ignored of our brothers and sisters, so that they can see themselves as the principal protagonists of their destiny of their nation. This is one. I think Pope Francis has a lot of in mind here, and probably for us in the U.S. doesn't really apply much, but Pope Francis has here in mind, like, all those countries, and I call them from my own experience, like Colombia, and even in Guatemala, in Central America, some countries that have guerrillas and have conflicts, or countries that even have like civil war, and things that has happened in these years, and he has in mind that because there's so much uh, hurt in there, that people need to really be able to come together and discuss, and having everybody involved in it, so that the nations can prosper, no. And that's why he quotes from the Latin American bishops that Only the closeness that makes us friends can enable us to appreciate deeply the values of the poor today, their desires, and their own manner of living the faith. The auction for the poor should lead us to friendship with the poor. That's a good way. So let us move to the next one. Oh, the value and meaning of forgiveness. There are those who prefer not to talk about reconciliation, for they think that conflict, violence, and breakdown are part of normal functioning of a society. In any human group, there are always going to be more or less subtle power struggles between different parties. Others, others think that promoting forgiveness means yielding ground and influence to others. For this reason, they feel it is better to keep things as they are, maintaining a balance of power between different groups. Still, others believe that reconciliation is a sign of weakness, incapable of truly serious dialogue. They choose to avoid problems by ignoring injustice. Unable to deal with these problems, they opt for an apparent peace. And this is, I think it's really everything in there, that it's not to just like sweep under the rug that we say the problems. No, it's kind of being able to tackle them, to dialogue, to listen, and to forgive. Is not that I'm weak, because the world, as the Gospel of John will say, the world, it looks into revenge, but the Christian way, we the sons of light, to use the Gospel of John, we look into reconciliation, into forgiveness, and to see how can we come together, no? So the next one, if Pope Francis talks about that conflict is inevitable. There's always going to be a conflict. There's always going to be problems and frictions between people, no? And that's not really like something that we could just say. It would be naive to think that there's not going to be friction and there's not going to be conflict. Now, for us, Jesus never promote violence or intolerance. He openly condemned the use of force to gain power over others. And he says, no, quoting the Gospel of Matthew, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. It will not be so among you. Instead, the Gospel tells us to forgive 70 times 7, and offers the example of a merciful servant who was himself forgiving, yet unable to forgive others in turn. The next one. Forgiveness does not entail allowing oppressors to keep trampling on their own dignity and that of others, or letting criminals continue their wrongdoing. Those who suffer injustice have to defend strenuously their own rights and those of their family, precisely because they must preserve the dignity they have received as loving gift from God. So it's and I think it's really like true that forgiveness or to try to dialogue and to try to resolve our conflicts and bring reconciliation doesn't mean that, then Eloy is wrongdoing it to me, and I'm like, okay, because I'm gonna forgive him and I'm gonna allow him to be a bad person. No, he has to stop, because being a bad person is going against his own human dignity. But I need to be able to forgive him. Good, Eloy. Anyway, so the next slide. The best way to move on, he says, when conflicts are not resolved but kept hidden or buried in the past, silence can lead to complicity in grave misdeeds and sins. Authentic reconciliation does not flee from conflict, but is a shift in conflict, resolving it through dialogue and open, honest, and patient negotiation. Conflict between different groups, if it abstains from enmities and mutual hatred, gradually change into an honest discussion of difference founded on a desire for justice. So moving on is, okay, let's head on into the conflict, but dialoguing reconciling our differences, and allowing and to create a society that is polyphacetic, because I cannot pronounce well the other word. So polyphacetic is the best. So how are we in time, Eloy? You 43. Okay. Memory. So let's see. So Pope Francis talked about that uh, reconciliation needs to happen, and the forgiveness needs to happen, but we have to have memory of what had happened in the past. And he quoted two things, like what happened with the Jewish people in the Nazis time. Those were horrors that we need to be able to forgive the people who did it, but not to forget what has happened, because when we forget our past, we are doomed to repeat it. And he also talks about like the terrible thing about the atomic bombs and what they did in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And he also needs to he mentions that those things that we need to be able to forgive, but again, not forgetting this, because if we can never move forward without remembering the past, we do not progress without an honest and unclouded memory. He talks, we need to keep alive the flame of collective conscience, bearing witness to succeeding generations to the horror of what happened, because that witnesses awakens and perseveres the memory of the victims, so that the conscience of humanity may rise up in the face of every desire for dominance and destruction. So the next one, he talks about forgiving but not forgetting. And I used to think that we should forgive and forget, but he talks about like forgiving does not mean forgetting, or better, in the face of reality that can in no way be denied, relativized, or concealed, forgiveness is still possible. In the face of an action that can never be tolerated, justified, or excused, we can still forgive. This is really like challenging for any of us in Christianity, no? In the face of something that cannot be forgotten for any reason, we can still forgive. Free and heartfelt forgiveness is something noble, a reflection of God's own infinite ability to forgive. If forgiveness is gracious, then it can be shown even to someone who resists repentance and is unable to beg pardon. This is, I don't know about you, but this is really like something that is really hard, because many of us have heard this conversation and have heard that people say, well, I'm gonna forgive him or her if she asks for forgiveness, and like, if not, I'm not doing it. And Pope Francis is inviting us that forgiveness is the ability to just, even if the person resists to repent and resists to beg pardon, we need to be able to forgive. So he says, those who truly forgive do not forget. Instead, they chose not to yield to the same destructive force that caused them so much suffering. They break the vicious circle. They halt and advance of the forces of destruction. It's a powerful thing. So he talks about here also about the death penalty and word. There are two, and he talks about this one is, there are two extreme situations that may come to be seen as solutions in especially dramatic circumstances, without realizing that they are false answers that do not resolve the problems they are meant to solve. And ultimately, they do no more than introduce new elements of destruction in the fabric of national and global society. These are war and death penalty. So, the injustice of war. This, the next slide. The city is in the midst of those who plan evil, but those who counsel peace have joy. Yet there are those who seek solutions in work, frequently fueled by a breakdown in relations. He, 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 huh? Hegemonic? Oh wow, that was not. Ambitious, abuses of power, fear others, and tendency to see diversity as an obstacle. Word is not a ghost from the past, but a constant threat. Our world is encountering growing difficulties on the slow path to peace upon which it had embarked and which has already begun to bear good fruit. Remember, we have been Second World War. It's been long past, but it's still like it's not something. Word is not something from the past, but it's latent and patent there. So we are always on the brink of a war. And so on the John the 23rd talks about it no longer makes sense to maintain that war is a fit instrument with which to repair the violation of justice. No, word. I know in the Catholic Church, in the Catholic teaching by Thomas Aquinas, it was that a word could be just, but as we discuss in our social moral teachings, um, there's no longer uh, that teaching. That's no longer there. These words are no longer just, and as Saint John Paul II also would always be very much against word. And then regarding death penalty, and probably this is one of the things that touches very much this country, is that there is yet another way to eliminate others. One aimed not at countries but at individuals. It is the death penalty. St. John Paul II stated clearly and firmly that the death penalty is inadequate from a moral standpoint and no longer necessary from that of penal justice. There can be no stepping back from this position. Today we state clearly that death penalty is inadmissible, and the Church is firmly committed to calling for its abolition worldwide. Here I would stress that it is impossible to imagine that states today have no other means than capital punishment to protect the lives of other people from unjust aggressor. Particularly serious in this regard are so-called extrajudicial or extralegal executions, which are homicides deliberately committed by certain states and by their agents, often passed off as clashes with criminals or presented as the unintended consequences of the reasonable, necessary, and proportionate use of force in applying the law. Wow. So I think we need to stop here because Eloy just posted there. Yeah. Uh, um, we maybe have to still do something else for chapter 8, but we leave it there. Is there any questions? What? Comments, complaints? Let's keep Father Juan on his toes. He's refreshing. Oh, Eloy. So nice.
Except for complaints, we can offer those up in prayer.
So, any questions regarding this? I mean, I know this is it's too much information altogether, but um, I think what we could do next week is finish this and then probably kind of a recount of what it means will be. I came across in the American magazine an article from like some theologians who discuss the kind of study on the Encyclical and say what kind of meant for people here in the U.S. So I guess we could do chapter 8 and kind of conclude with that to see few things or teachings in the Encyclical which will be meaningful to us in the U.S. Um, Again, please remember to pray for Father Anthony and Father Ron as they recover for their COVID. Um, and then also pray for our parishes, for some our staff, and for all of us that we continue to be strong throughout these difficult times and throughout this pandemic. Please be also mindful that let everybody that you may know that this next weekends, so the weekend of sorry, I have to check, I don't know, the 14th and 15th, and then the 21st and 22nd, we are not having public masses here in the parish of in the parish. So we will be, the next time that we will have a public mass is on the weekend of the 28th and 29th, and that's the first weekend of Advent. So throughout this couple of weeks ahead of us, we'll have the live stream mass for Sunday at 9 o'clock in English, noon in Spanish, and then from Tuesday through Friday, we'll do the 9 o'clock in English mass live stream, and then 10 o'clock in Spanish. And we on Saturday will continue to do our study. That's what we will be doing this week. Please keep us all in prayers, and let's pray together and have a nice day. Enjoy. I mean, it's beautiful to see that we are already in November and we don't have snow. Wow. Well, I hope there is snow for Christmas. And anyway, so that we could have at least half a snow in Christmas and celebrate our white Christmas that we do. Anyway, so have a wonderful day. Enjoy, and see you at Mass tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Take care. Bye bye.